So I think there's a question out there of like, why didn't it do better when it comes to Superman, right? And I think that's fair because these numbers are good, and even between the very first segment we did today and this segment here, the numbers have gone up. So you're looking at 3 million more on the domestic side. Seems to make it 220 total, 125 domestic take, which is pretty damn good. But I still think there's a question of like, why not more? You know, I mean, it's tracking behind Man of Steel. It's tracking behind a lot of big Marvel movies. It's tracking behind the Batman, you know, the Matt Reeves John, right? So the question is like, why? Why isn't it tracking better? And then, you know, an extension of that question is, how can it do better from here? Because I got to say this, you know, as much as I love the movie, you know, we're going to see how the box office actually shakes out. But I still think this is kind of disappointing considering Superman is the biggest superhero ever. Like, he should be the most known, like, obviously a super big deal. So to me, I would have expected a lot more. When we were talking about projections last week, I was expecting around 250. I thought it really would open to like 140 domestic and like 110 worldwide. I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. 250 worldwide, great opening. We're under that, right? So the question would be why? Well, maybe the best way to answer this is to actually discuss why and how I think it can do better next time. Okay, so what will make DC pop in the future? And maybe by going through this, we can understand why it didn't pop so much right now. I think the first thing you could point out is it's obvious that if the movie was bigger, it would do better. Okay, so this movie is really crazy. There's a lot going on. It's very fun. It's a little all over the place, but it really is just Superman getting kind of tricked and played by Lex Luthor, beating a Kryptonian clone. Like, that's like basically it, okay? Whereas, like, you know, Man of Steel, you cold open, like, on Krypton. You're seeing that culture. You're like, holy shit, this is fucking crazy. Then you have Man of Steel, Superman having visions, seeing the thing with Zod with all the skulls and shit like that. You've got him, you know, obviously fighting the big Kryptonian, fighting Zod at the very end of the film. Man of Steel feels like it's an easier sell to like just your average moviegoer. Like, there's just so much more going on. It feels like a bigger movie. Gunn's Superman feels very small, isolated on the character of Superman himself. I mean, beyond that, it's obvious if you were to add a Batman to this, it would be absolutely massive. Batman v Superman was the thought process during the Snyder era, because I think they know Batman is a much more popular character. That would do a lot better. I think if the villain were more grand, like something like a Darkseid, like something like a Brainiac, even Blackest Night or something like that, I feel like that's a lot crazier, right? And the good news here is they will dial it up. Just naturally, you always want the sequel to be bigger. You want to go bigger. You want to build towards something. And so it's not necessarily a problem that Superman started this way, but I bet Warner Brothers is going to take a look at the box office, depending on where it shakes out. And I bet they're going to say, we probably should have gone for more of like an obvious spectacle and sell. Like an obvious sell on what is the big bad here. Why is that so crazy? So the Marvel equivalent would be like, you really do want to do a Doctor Doom, or you really do want to do an Ultron, a Loki, a Thanos, as compared to maybe some of the more weaker villains that you've seen in some of the other weaker Marvel projects, right? So I think that's kind of part of it, is like it probably should be bigger. Like, I don't know if you guys agree, but doesn't this movie feel a little small? And I think it's the selling point too. If you really think about this, what's the selling point of Superman? That it's just like really good Superman, right? Like, at the end of the day, what most people are saying about this film is he's the perfect Superman. It's a great Superman movie. But they're not really saying, like, holy shit, that Superman movie. Does that make sense? That's a different thing, you know? And strangely, I actually think a lot of other movies are doing this better. Like, I think the Jurassic movie did it better. Dude, I couldn't tell you what the fuck the Jurassic movie is about, but I know for sure that if you go to see that movie, you're going to see a bunch of Jurassic stuff, a bunch of dinosaurs, a bunch of tense scenes where people get hurt or killed or crazy shit like that. Like, it's obvious that that's what it's going to be, and it seems like it has it in spades. I don't know what a chicken jockey is, but I know Minecraft is full of a whole bunch of goddamn ridiculous stuff that made people do TikToks and yell in their theater and throw popcorn, stand up on each other and do all kinds of crazy shit like that, okay? I don't even know what a Lilo and Stitch is, but I think there's an inherent value proposition to seeing the live action version of something you loved in animated form. I think that's what it is. I don't think Superman has anything like that. I don't think it has anything that you can easily sell to a normie audience to excite them, especially if they don't like Superman. I also want to say that I think this movie and I think this universe needs way less Gunn, way less James Gunn. Okay, and I want to break this down though, because it's more than just like we need less James Gunn. There's actually a reason that I think this could be holding the film back, right? And Grace Randolph, I didn't agree with everything she said in Movie Math yesterday, but one thing she said about Gunn I thought was actually pretty on point. The studio, Warner Brothers, clearly decided that Gunn was the draw. Okay? Meaning, you know, that's why he's in all the promo, right? That's why he's doing the big announcements. That's why he's in the beginning of Peacemaker, all of this shit. From their perspective, from Zazzy's perspective, we got the Marvel guy. We got the Guardians of the Galaxy guy. So from their perspective, they're like, we've got the fucking Marvel guy. So of course we want to use him to leverage all the Marvel fans to enter into this universe, okay? Totally makes sense from their perspective. You could also argue that David is not a big draw. Rachel is not a big draw. You know, Nicholas Hoult is a decent draw, but even still, it's not like he's even close to like a Tom Cruise level or anything like that, okay? So you could see why the studio took this path. It makes sense. Here's the problem. I think the studio is, and this is what Grace brought up, they are underestimating the anti-Hollywood sentiment. Okay? James Gunn is a Hollywood guy. He's the director. He's the president. He's the writer. He's the filmmaker. Inherently, by making the marketing focus on that guy, you have taken the focus away from the character, the universe, the world. And because of how anti-Hollywood so many different people are these days, the focus on Gunn becomes a focus on the Hollywood aspect of the film. So I think for multiple reasons, Gunn cannot be the focus of this universe moving forward. I just think that's actually something that may have held this movie way the fuck back, right? So I think the focus needs to go onto the characters, the world, the story that's being told, right? And so if you shift the conversation into the world, the characters, and then also the spectacle surrounding this thing, I think that's probably the better move moving forward. You know, and it really depends. The jury's kind of out on this movie. If this movie makes it to 700, then James is going to be able to do whatever he wants. They're going to focus on him forever, and like they're gonna be fine in their cooking, okay? But I think most reasonable folks are looking at this box office, looking at the market, looking at the industry, and they're like, this thing should have done better. Period. And it's worth thinking about why it did not go better. You know, you might not like some of these voices that are out there, but it's probably worth at least listening to hear how many of these other folks, like the retractors and the anti-woke people and all these other people, they all seem to have an issue with how James Gunn this thing is. Like they keep saying like Superman's James Gunn or something like that. Like I've seen like Gary from Nerd Erotic continue to say that. And the reality is there is a large contingent of folks that are bothered by how front and center he is. And I think they do themselves a disservice, the studio does, by making that distinction, by focusing on that. I think it could actually be why it's not doing as good as you would think. Because frankly, back when Zack made Man of Steel, not a lot of people even knew who the fuck Zack Snyder was. Like hardcore people did, but Zack wasn't out there like I remember even Kevin Smith wasn't really aware of Zack. Like I remember him on the Fat Man on Batman podcast a couple of times talking about this whole thing, talking about Man of Steel, and like Snyder was like, he wasn't like completely unknown, but he was somewhat of an unknown entity in that space. You know what I mean? And that's interesting. You know, they clearly sold Man of Steel off of like spectacle action, the character, a new interpretation of the character, and it appears to be doing better than the modern James Gunn Superman. These are things worth thinking about. Like, these are things worth breaking down. So, yeah, at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I actually have a poll going on right now on my Twitter. Let me see the results of the poll. So it has almost 1,000. I would recommend you guys go vote on this poll. I'd love for this thing to get over 3,000 votes, so we have like somewhat of a scientific response here. Almost 1,000 votes already. Should DC try to be less Gunnified moving forward? You have 60% of folks saying yes, do less gun stuff, with only 40% of people saying no, keep the gun stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think this is actually the thing that is holding the movie back the most. And I think they need to let it go. You know what I mean? I really do. We'll see. The trouble with Supergirl is a lot of folks believe that Gunn was hands-off on Superman, allowed Superman to be exactly who he needed to be. But a lot of folks, from what I've seen online, they view Supergirl as like a total James Gunn thing. Like, they just feel like Supergirl being the hot mess and being the drunkard and telling him, you know, calling Superman a bitch. A lot of folks think Supergirl is way too James Gunn. And this is another reason why I think it was potentially a mistake to go from Superman into Supergirl. I mean, let me ask you this. Let me leave this segment by asking you a question. Okay, this is a very, very important question. It doesn't matter that it was from a comic. It matters how the audience will receive it. And here's why. If Superman barely makes $500 million and Supergirl makes less, how can Warner Brothers justify more of this universe? Do you understand what I'm saying here? If that actually happens, they're in a very difficult situation. Do you know what I'm saying? You might not agree, and personally, I am excited for Supergirl, but I'm also not so daft that I can't see how other folks are talking. I can't see in the numbers that it's not doing what it should, right? Like, I'm trying to be super fair here. I legitimately think this could be a mistake, and I legitimately think the DCU needs to be way less James Gunn moving forward, and I think it'll do much better. So that's my thoughts on how to make the DCU pop moving forward, because the bottom line is, guys, they need it to pop. They need Supergirl to do better. Clayface can probably not do better because it's like almost a side project and it has a much lower budget. Supergirl needs to operate at the same level as Superman or better. If there's a significant drop-off, this whole universe could go up in flames, like legitimately. So those are my thoughts. Would love to know what you think, though. Let me know. What are your thoughts, chat? Thanks for watching, and if you like this clip, smash a like on the actual video and subscribe to this channel. That way more of these clips get into your feed. I've also linked the full episode below if you want to check out the entire thing, including the Q&A we do with fans. You can also watch this show live. We do it live Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And you can also find all of my content, including the videos I put on my main YouTube channel, on the podcast feed.